Hi, I'm Chef Randy Williams from the Culinary Institute of Charleston at Trident Tech, and today we're going to make a smoked pork tenderloin with creamless cream corn, candied pecans, and a maple drizzle. So I cheated a little bit and I pre-smoked my pork tenderloin. We've got it in the oven now, warming up. Now we're going to make the corn. So I made a corn stock, my corn milk, and my roasted corn. The roasted corn I roasted in the oven, in the husk. Took it off, cut it off the cob. Then I took raw corn, cut raw corn off the cob, pureed it in a blender. Took all of my cobs and made a stock. A little onion, a little celery, a little leeks, and water, cooked about 45 minutes to an hour. So I've got these three ingredients. We've added our roasted corn. Now we're going to add our corn milk. The trick with this corn milk, that's the whole, what makes this creamless cream corn. So instead of adding a bunch of cream to thicken up, we're actually adding the pureed corn. And that corn was pureed raw. So with that raw puree, we've got raw cornstarch in there. So that raw cornstarch is going to thicken as it heats. And that's what's actually going to thicken our cream corn. And then we use the stock just to thin it out as we see necessary. Now it's important that while we're cooking, to watch the texture and only add a little bit of stock at a time so that we don't make the corn starch break. So it's going to cook up nice and easy. We're going to keep it going. I'm going to chop some sage to put in this. In the end of summer, I like to use tarragon when corn season rolls around, but as it gets colder, sage I turn to. Just gives more of those fall and winter flavors. And I want to layer the flavors of sage in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add about 2/3 of it at the beginning so it cooks down with it and melds the flavors. And then I'm going to add a touch of the sage right at the end to get those fresh, bright sage flavors. Okay? So as I said, about 2/3 of it are going to go in. Very important to keep this stirred so the starch doesn't stick to the bottom. And it's already started to thicken a little bit, so we're going to add a little more stock as we go. The nice part about making it with this corn, we're just fortifying more corn flavor, and we're cutting a lot of fat out of the traditional dish by taking all the heavy cream out. Now we have these candied pecans. These are pretty easy to make. We're just going to froth up egg whites. There's a little sugar, cinnamon, maple syrup, and a touch of cayenne just for some background heat, nothing to make it too spicy. Just kind of make these savory and not just completely sweet like a dessert. And we want some texture left to these. These add a nice crunch to the dish. So we want to chop them up, but not super fine. The fun thing about fall and winter for savory chefs, it's one of the only times we get to use the baking spices. We also get to use a little bit of sweetness here and there, a little honey, a little maple in the dishes that we make. So again, we'll reserve those for the final plating. You can see we're starting to get a little simmer and we're still thickening back up. That looks great. It's easy to tell when this is done, because if you taste it early, you can taste it's still very starchy. When that starch cooks out, it sweetens up, and we know it's done. Let's go ahead and season a little bit too. Salt and a little pepper. All right, now on to our pork. So I've got my nice pork tenderloin. Like I said, it's been smoked at 225. If you don't have a smoker, no problem. We're going to put it in an oven and roast it at 225. We want to pull it out when the temperature is about 121. Now you may think, oh, that's really low for pork, but one, it's going to rest and cool, so it's going to come up in temp. And then we're going to finish off and do a nice baste and get some more color and sear on the outside, and that's going to finish the cooking process for us. So we've got our cast iron getting nice and hot here. Our corn is really close to being done. Only takes about 6 tops 8 minutes. You will find this is one of those dishes that's very important to taste because some corn is starchier than others, some is sweeter. So the sweeter the corn, the less starch. With the less starch, you'll have to thin out less, but it's going to be a sweeter flavor. More starch, it's going to thicken on you a lot quicker. You're going to have to use more stock, but it's not going to be quite as sweet. And we find that as it gets cooler, the corn harvested tends to get a little less sweet. All right, so we're going to get butter in the pan. We're not going to eat all this butter. It's for basting, so don't be scared to use the butter here. We want to get the sage in the pan as well. A couple sprigs of sage there. We're going to let that get toasted. So all of the flavor out of most of your herbs are going to be the essential oils in the leaves. So what we're doing here, we're actually going to cook those essential oils down into the butter and then discard the actual leaves themselves so we get all of that flavor to baste the pork. So you're going to see too here, I'm kind of beating up the leaves a little bit just to kind of help get those oils into the butter itself. And you can't see it now, but everybody's drooling because you can start to smell the sage now. That nice brown butter flavor too is great for fall, winter cooking. This is a very French technique to do this basting style. So we'll add our pork back to the pan. With that nice hot bubbling butter, we're going to keep that butter on the stove and hot and boiling. And then we're just going to baste to finish this pork off. And once again, it's important to keep it on the heat because you can see that butter is still boiling, kind of bubbling. And we need that high heat on that fat. If you just pour cold fat on a hot piece of meat, it's just going to make the skin soggy. And you can see we have this nice brown sear on here. To keep that crispy and help crisp it up even more, you want to keep that butter hot, bubbling, simmering. Just like that. All right. And now we're going to do one last little bit of thinning here just to get it right to the consistency we want. And don't throw that corn stock away if you don't use it all. You can use it as the base for any soups, butternut squash soup, cauliflower soup, you name it. It's a nice base as opposed to using water. Okay. Let's plate this dish. So we're going to slice the pork. Nice rosy interior. And this is a good dish too, that you could actually plate family style. I like to serve pork tenderloin along with my turkey at Thanksgiving and also Christmas sometimes. It's a great winter dish to have, the smokiness and then the roasted with the sage. All right, let's put our nice corn down here. Pork. All right, as I said before, to get a little crunch to this dish and to add that fall, winter flavor, we'll do those candied pecans in here. And then last but not least, a little bit of maple drizzle. And there we go. Thanks for joining us.